Fatal Words, Things You Should Never Say in Public Speaking. By James Whitmore. Published by Audiobooks Hub. Introduction. Every time you step on a stage, whether it's a boardroom presentation, a wedding toast, or a conference keynote, you hold in your hands a fragile moment, an audience's attention. It's a living, breathing thing, and it reacts instantly to your words. Say the right thing, and the room lights up, people lean in, nod, even smile. Say the wrong thing, and you can feel the air go flat. Faces turn blank. Phones appear. Whispers start. The energy dies, and with it, your credibility. Most books on public speaking focus on what you should say, how to open with a bang, tell compelling stories, or use humor effectively. This book is different. It's about the words and phrases you should never say. Because one careless remark, one offhand comment, can undo months of preparation. I've spent more than 2 decades coaching executives, politicians, teachers, and everyday people who simply wanted to be heard. Over the years, I've noticed a pattern. The mistakes that derail a speech are not usually about shaky hands, a dry throat, or poor slides. They're about language, specific words that instantly erode trust, drain authority, or make you sound insecure. We don't talk enough about the destructive power of language in public speaking. We celebrate killer openings and powerful closings, but rarely warn speakers about the verbal landmines hidden in plain sight. That's what this book will do for you. Think of it as a survival guide. It will show you the phrases to avoid, why they're dangerous, and what to say instead. You might be surprised by some of them. They're not all obviously offensive or rude. In fact, some seem harmless, even polite. But under the surface, they send the wrong message. They signal weakness when you want strength, or arrogance when you want warmth. They can make you sound unprepared, dishonest, or irrelevant, without you even realizing it. This isn't about censorship. You should speak freely and authentically. But authenticity doesn't mean saying anything that pops into your head. Great speakers are deliberate. They choose their words with care, knowing that language shapes perception. You can still be yourself, just a wiser, sharper version. Here's a quick example from a client I once coached. She was a brilliant scientist asked to present at an international conference. She opened her talk by saying, "I'm not really a great speaker, but I'll try my best." It was meant to be humble. Instead, it made the audience doubt her before she even began. By the time she got to her groundbreaking research, she had already lost half the room. We worked on a different opening, one that was both warm and confident. At her next talk, she didn't apologize for herself. She led with a story about why her research mattered. The difference was stunning. She got a standing ovation. This book will help you avoid those fatal words. In the next 10 chapters, you'll learn about 10 specific categories of phrases to never use in public speaking. Each chapter will explain why these words are dangerous, show you how they show up in real speeches, and give you practical replacements you can use immediately. You'll discover why you should never begin with a weak apology. Why disclaimers sabotage your credibility. Why certain jokes backfire. Why some polite words actually alienate your audience. And you'll learn how to build a vocabulary of authority, clarity, and empathy instead. By the end of the book, you'll not only know what to avoid, you'll have a toolkit of better words and techniques to make every speech stronger. Whether you're a seasoned speaker or terrified of your first presentation, this knowledge will give you an edge. And there's something else. Throughout these pages, I'll share stories from my work with clients, moments when a single sentence changed the entire trajectory of a talk, for better or worse. These real examples will help you see the principles in action. Let me be clear, you don't have to be perfect. Every speaker slips up now and then. The goal isn't to become a robot with flawless speech. The goal is to avoid the most dangerous verbal traps, the ones that instantly undercut your authority or connection. Once you know them, you'll hear them everywhere, in political debates, in business presentations, in wedding speeches. And you'll be able to do better. There's a kind of freedom in this knowledge. When you understand which words weaken you, you can stop using them. You can stop worrying about accidentally offending or undermining yourself. You can focus on your message instead of your nerves. You can walk onto any stage knowing you're not about to step on a verbal landmine. One last thing before we begin. As you read, don't just nod along. Apply these lessons. Think about your next speech, presentation, or meeting. Look at your notes and slides. Circle any phrases from this book that you're guilty of using. Replace them with the alternatives I'll suggest. Practice out loud. The more you do this, the more natural it will feel. When you finish this book, you'll be a different kind of speaker, not just someone who knows how to deliver a message, but someone who knows how to protect it. You'll be sharper, more confident, more persuasive. And you'll never again sabotage yourself with fatal words. Are you ready? Let's dive into the first category of dangerous phrases and see why they're so common and so destructive. Chapter 1. I'm sorry, I'm not a good speaker. If I had $1 for every time I heard a speaker open with that line, I'd be retired on a beach somewhere. It's such a common phrase, and it feels so harmless, humble, even endearing. People think it lowers expectations or makes them relatable. In reality, it's one of the fastest ways to kill your credibility before you've even begun. Apologies at the start of a talk do something powerful, but not in the way you want. They transfer your discomfort onto the audience. They tell people, I'm not worth your full attention. They plant seeds of doubt that sprout instantly. A listener who might have been curious about your message is suddenly evaluating your competence instead. Even if your content is brilliant, the first impression is already working against you. I saw this happen with a young entrepreneur pitching to investors. She walked to the front of the room, clutched her notes, and said, I'm not really good at speaking in front of people, so bear with me. Her technology was fantastic. Her business plan solid. But the moment she said those words, you could feel the energy drain from the room. People stopped leaning forward. They crossed their arms. Some glanced at their phones. She lost them in the first 10 seconds. Why does this happen? Because audiences take their cues from you. If you signal that you're not confident, they won't be either. They're not cruel, they're human. We all rely on subtle signals to decide who to trust. In a high-stakes setting, an investor pitch, a keynote, a job interview, confidence isn't a luxury, it's part of your message. When you apologize or downplay yourself at the start, you're essentially telling people your own talk isn't worth listening to. Sometimes speakers think they're being polite. They don't want to seem arrogant. But there's a difference between arrogance and confidence. You can open warmly without undermining yourself. Instead of apologizing, acknowledge your nerves if you must, but frame it as excitement. Say, I'm thrilled to be here rather than I'm sorry if I stumble. One builds anticipation, the other drains it. Another version of this fatal phrase is, I didn't have much time to prepare. This isn't my best presentation. I'm no expert. All of them do the same thing. They tell people not to expect much. They shift responsibility for the quality of the talk onto the audience, as if to say, if this is bad, it's your job to forgive me. Most listeners won't consciously think this, but they'll feel it. So what do you say instead? Start with confidence, even if you're nervous inside. Begin with a story, a statistic, a bold statement, or a question that draws people in. You don't have to fake being someone else, you just have to remove self-sabotage from your opening. Here are a few examples. Instead of I'm not a good speaker, say, I'm excited to share something that could change the way you think about. Let me take you back to a moment that changed everything for me. Here's a number that shocked me when I first learned it. Each of these openings does three things at once. It claims authority, it engages curiosity, and it frames the talk as valuable. You haven't said you're perfect. You haven't pretended you're a TED veteran. But you've made the audience feel they're in good hands. When you catch yourself about to apologize, pause. Ask, is this actually helping the audience? 9 times out of 10, it's helping you manage your nerves, not them. Find another way to do that: deep breathing, rehearsing, grounding yourself. But don't make it their problem. A trick I teach my clients: before you go on stage, write the first sentence of your talk in large letters on a card. Make sure it's strong and positive. Practice it until it feels natural. That one sentence sets the tone for everything else. If you open with strength, the audience will forgive small mistakes later. If you open with weakness, you'll have to fight to win them back. Think of your opening like the first scene of a movie. Viewers don't yet know the plot. They're deciding whether to invest their attention. Would a director ever start with, "This movie might not be good, but please watch anyway"? Of course not. They hook you. They show you something intriguing. They set expectations. You should do the same. This isn't about perfection. I've seen speakers stutter, forget lines, even spill water on themselves and still win over an audience, because they didn't apologize for existing. They kept their energy high, stayed focused on the message, and the crowd stayed with them. One of my favorite transformations happened with a college student preparing a speech competition. She had a habit of saying, "I'm not very good at this," before practicing. We banned that phrase from her rehearsals. She had to open with her story instead. At first it felt unnatural. By the final round, she stepped up, smiled, and said, "Let me tell you about the day my life changed." The judges were captivated. She won first place. The point of this chapter is simple: never begin a talk by apologizing for yourself. It may feel like humility, but it reads as insecurity. Audiences want you to succeed. They want to trust you. Don't give them a reason not to. When you remove apologetic language from your openings, something interesting happens. You feel stronger too. Confidence isn't just an act, it's a feedback loop. Speak as if you're worth listening to, and you start to believe it. Believe it, and you speak even better. So before your next presentation, review your notes. Circle any apologies, disclaimers, or self-deprecating jokes at the start. Replace them with a strong, audience-focused opening. Practice it until you can say it without hesitation. Step on stage knowing you've already cleared the first landmine. Your audience doesn't need a perfect speaker. They need a trustworthy guide. Be that person from the first word, and you've already won half the battle. Chapter 2. Can you hear me? It's almost automatic. A speaker walks to the microphone, clears their throat, and asks the audience, "Can you hear me?" You've probably said it yourself at some point. It seems like a harmless check, maybe even a polite one. But in the world of public speaking, this phrase is another silent killer. Here's why. The moment you ask, "Can you hear me?" you shift responsibility for the start of your talk onto the audience. You tell them, without words, that you're not fully prepared. You suggest that you don't trust the equipment, the organizers, or your own presence. It's a shaky start that undermines authority. Instead of beginning with strength, you begin with doubt. Now, imagine how this feels from the listener's perspective. They've settled into their seats, maybe with a coffee in hand, waiting for you to deliver something worth their time. Instead, the first thing they hear is a test. It breaks the moment. Instead of engaging, they're now awkwardly deciding whether to nod, shout, or raise a hand. Your momentum is lost before it even begins. Let me share a story. I once coached a CEO preparing for a high-profile product launch. At rehearsal, he grabbed the mic and immediately said, "Can you hear me in the back?" His team responded, but the energy in the room dropped. It sounded tentative, insecure, almost like he wasn't sure he deserved to be heard. We worked on a different opening. He walked out, looked at the audience, and said, "Today, we're about to change the way you think about energy. Strong, confident, no doubt." At the real event, the room erupted in applause within minutes. Same man, same message, different words. So, what should you do if you're worried about volume or sound quality? Prepare before you begin. Arrive early. Test the microphone. Walk the stage. Ask the technical team to confirm that everything is working. If you're in a smaller room without a microphone, project your voice with clarity from the start. Don't make the audience responsible for your setup. Another common variation is this thing on? Can everyone hear me? I'll try to speak loudly enough. All of these broadcast the same thing, hesitation. They plant the idea that hearing you might be a problem, even when it isn't. The irony is that if someone truly can't hear you, they'll let you know. Audiences aren't shy about that. You don't need to ask. Instead of testing your audio with words, begin with presence. Stand tall. Make eye contact. Deliver your opening line clearly and confidently. If there's a sound issue, someone will raise a hand or wave, and you can calmly adjust. But don't volunteer the doubt. Here's a practical trick: always memorize your first 2 sentences. Don't just glance at them on a slide or a card. Memorize them until you can say them with power. That way, you launch straight into your message without filler, hesitation, or fatal words. Imagine 2 different beginnings. Speaker A: can you hear me? Okay, great. So what I wanted to talk about today is... Speaker B walks up, smiles, and says, "In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you why everything you thought you knew about teamwork is wrong." Which one earns your attention? Which one makes you sit up? It's obvious. The first is tentative, the second authoritative. And the only difference is the choice of words. Another reason to avoid "can you hear me" is that it subtly trains the audience to be passive. You're asking them for a basic function check rather than inviting them into your message. Contrast that with a real question that hooks curiosity. What if I told you the greatest obstacle to success is the very thing you use every day? That gets them thinking. It sparks engagement. You've made them participants in your idea, not your sound check. I once watched a seasoned speaker walk onto a stage of 500 people. He didn't ask if they could hear him. He began with a pause, looked around the room, and said, "Every person in this room has already made 3 life-changing decisions today, and most of you don't even know it." The audience leaned in immediately. That's the power of a confident opening. No tests, no questions about volume, just presence and authority. Of course, accidents happen. Sometimes microphones cut out. Sometimes the sound really is bad. If that happens, you don't panic, and you don't apologize. You handle it gracefully. You pause, smile, and say, "Looks like we're having a sound adventure. Let's fix this quickly so we can dive in." Humor helps, but notice the difference. You're not asking, you're leading. You remain in control of the room, even in technical chaos. That's the deeper lesson here. The first words you say signal to the audience who's in charge. "Can you hear me?" signals insecurity. A confident opening signals authority. Authority builds trust. Trust makes your message land. So before your next talk, cross "can you hear me" off your mental list. Instead, start with strength. Trust the setup, trust the organizers, and most importantly, trust yourself. Step into that space knowing your voice deserves to be heard. The audience isn't there to check your volume. They're there to hear your ideas. Give them that gift from the very first word. Chapter 3. To be honest with you. It slips out so easily. You're trying to emphasize sincerity, to build trust. You lean forward and say, to be honest with you, or its cousins honestly, or if I'm being honest, you mean well. But in public speaking, these words can quietly erode the very credibility you're trying to build. Why? Because honesty should be assumed. When you're on a stage, people expect that what you're saying is truthful. If you preface a statement with "to be honest," you plant a seed of doubt. Were you not being honest before? You don't intend that implication, but listeners hear it subconsciously. It weakens the authority of everything you've already said. I once coached a senior manager giving a talk to her company about a new strategy. She was passionate, prepared, and persuasive. But every time she got to a key point, she said, "To be honest with you," by the third time, you could see people shifting in their seats. It began to sound like a confession, as if what she was about to say was uncomfortable or previously hidden. After our session, she replaced that phrase with simple, confident statements. The difference was immediate. She sounded straightforward and strong instead of tentative. There's another layer to this. To be honest is a filler phrase. People often use it when they're nervous, when they're about to say something slightly risky, or when they're stalling to find the next words. But filler phrases distract from your message. They make your speech sound less polished, less deliberate. And there's a tone problem. Honestly, can come across as confrontational or judgmental, especially when used before an opinion. Imagine hearing, "Honestly, you're all doing this wrong." It puts the audience on the defensive. Instead of opening them up to your point, it closes them off. So what should you do instead? First, become aware of how often you use honesty phrases in everyday speech. You might be surprised. Record yourself practicing a talk and listen back. Circle every "to be honest" or "honestly." Then replace them with silence or stronger language. Instead of, "To be honest with you, this is a tough challenge." Say, "This is a tough challenge." Instead of, "Honestly, I think we can do better." Say, "We can do better." You lose nothing, and you gain clarity. The statement stands on its own. It sounds confident and authentic without any prefacing. If you truly want to emphasize sincerity, you can use phrases like "here's the heart of it," "here's the truth," or "this is what matters most." These don't carry the same implication of previous dishonesty. They sound like signposts rather than confessions. A small shift like this can transform how your audience perceives you. They'll experience you as consistently trustworthy, not intermittently honest. They'll stop waiting for the real truth and start focusing on your message. I remember watching a young speaker at a leadership summit. He began his talk with, "To be honest, I didn't really know what to say today." The room chuckled, but in a nervous way. He instantly lowered the bar for himself. Imagine instead if he had said, "I'm going to share with you 3 lessons I learned the hard way." Same sentiment, humble, authentic, but framed with authority. This is a pattern you'll see throughout this book, words that seem to add warmth or humility but actually drain power. They're not evil, they're just sloppy habits. And like any habit, you can break them. A practical exercise: next time you rehearse a speech, place a sticky note on your notes that says "no honesty phrases." Every time you feel one rising to your lips, pause and reframe. At first you'll feel exposed, like you're stepping out without a verbal safety net. But soon your speech will feel cleaner, tighter, more deliberate. There's also a mindset shift here. Instead of thinking, "I need to prove I'm honest," think, "I am honest, and my language will reflect that." Speak from that place, and you'll project confidence naturally. Your audience doesn't need you to swear you're telling the truth. They need you to sound like you're telling the truth from the first word to the last. Drop the disclaimers, and your authenticity will shine through. When you strip away to be honest, you discover something powerful. Your ideas are enough. They don't need qualifiers. They don't need apologies. They stand strong on their own. And that's exactly how you want your audience to experience them: clear, confident, and trustworthy. Chapter 4. I'll keep this short. It sounds polite. It sounds considerate. You're standing at the podium, you see a room full of people, and you feel the pressure of their time. So you begin with, "Don't worry, I'll keep this short," or "I know you're busy, so I'll be quick." You think you're buying goodwill. In reality, you're quietly cutting your own knees out from under you. The first problem with "I'll keep this short" is expectation management. You've just told your audience that your talk is something to endure, not something to enjoy. You've framed it as a chore. Instead of creating curiosity about your message, you've created impatience. They're now waiting for you to finish instead of leaning in to hear what you'll say. Second, it signals lack of confidence. If your ideas are worth sharing, they're worth the time it takes to share them well. By promising brevity before you even begin, you imply your material isn't strong enough to stand on its own. You seem apologetic for taking up space. I watched a nonprofit leader make this mistake at a donor luncheon. She stood up, smiled nervously, and said, "I'll keep this short so you can all enjoy your dessert." Her audience chuckled, but not in a good way. They immediately shifted into waiting mode. By the time she got to her big story, she was rushing through it, glancing at her notes, speaking faster and faster. The impact of her message, the reason she had been invited to speak at all, was lost. Here's the irony: promising to be brief almost never makes you brief. Most people who start with "I'll keep this short" still go over time, which makes them seem untrustworthy or careless. They break a promise they never needed to make in the first place. There's a better way to show respect for your audience's time. Simply be concise. Plan your talk carefully. Cut fluff. Deliver your message with energy and clarity. But don't telegraph it as if you're apologizing. When you start strong, stay on track, and finish cleanly, people rarely complain that you spoke too long. In fact, they often say, "That flew by." Consider the difference between these two openings. I know everyone's tired, so I'll try to keep this brief. B, in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to show you a simple change that could save your company thousands of dollars. Both take about the same time to say. But the first one lowers expectations, the second one builds anticipation. The second tells people exactly what value they're about to receive. They're now alert, curious, and invested. Sometimes speakers use "I'll keep this short" as a way to calm their own nerves. They're hoping the audience will forgive them for being unpolished. But that's not your audience's job. Your job is to make your message so engaging they forget the clock. If you truly have a limited time slot, frame it positively. Say, "In the next 5 minutes, or today, I'll give you 3 quick tools you can use right away." This sets a clear expectation without sounding apologetic. You've turned time from a liability into a hook. Another variation to avoid: "I won't take up too much of your time." It carries the same subtext: "This might not be worth it." Imagine if a movie trailer began with, "This won't take long." You'd be reaching for your phone before the preview even ended. Audiences want to be excited, not placated. I once coached a medical researcher who had 10 minutes to present at a high-stakes conference. She opened with, "I'll be brief." We reworked it. At her next event, she opened with, "I'm going to show you a discovery that changes how we treat chronic pain." Same time limit. No apology. The audience leaned forward. She got more follow-up questions than anyone else that day. The principle here is simple: Your audience's time is precious, but so is your message. Don't belittle it before you deliver it. Respect their time by preparing, not by apologizing. Respect yourself by owning your stage time confidently. Before your next talk, look at your opening lines. If you see I'll be brief, I won't take up too much time, or I'll keep this short, cross them out. Replace them with a value-driven promise, what they'll learn, feel, or gain. Practice until you can say it with ease. This small shift turns an audience from passive timers into active participants. They stop thinking about when you'll finish and start thinking about what you're saying. That's the space where persuasion happens. And here's the secret. When you do this, you often are shorter because you're focused. You're not wasting time on filler or apologies. You're delivering your message cleanly, and the end comes naturally. So never start by promising to be short. Start by promising value. Then deliver it. That's how you respect your audience's time and your own. Chapter 5. This might sound stupid, but it comes out as a shield. You're about to share an idea, a story, or a statistic you think might be controversial or unexpected. You want to soften it. So you say, this might sound stupid, or this might be a dumb question, or I'm not sure if this makes sense, but you think you're protecting yourself. In reality, you're telling the audience your idea is weak before they even hear it. You're inviting them to judge it harshly. You're planting a label that they may never have applied on their own. I once coached a young engineer presenting a new product concept to senior executives. She opened one slide with, "This might sound crazy, but what if the idea was brilliant, a cost-saving feature no one had considered?" But by prefacing it with crazy, she made it easier for her audience to dismiss it. They smiled politely, nodded, and moved on. Later, in private, one of the executives said, "That idea had merit, but she didn't sound confident enough for me to champion it." This is the danger of self-deprecation before content. It seems humble, but it trains people to take you less seriously. In public speaking, framing matters as much as substance. If you frame your insight as stupid, it will be received as stupid no matter how smart it is. The same applies to questions. Speakers sometimes say, "This may be a dumb question," before asking something of their audience. It signals that you doubt yourself. It lowers the energy in the room. It also makes people uncomfortable. They feel they must reassure you rather than engage with the question itself. A better approach? Simply state your idea or question without apology. Let it stand on its own. If it's bold, that's good. Boldness is memorable. If it's different, that's also good. Difference is valuable. Your job is to deliver it with clarity and conviction. Instead of, "This might sound stupid, but I think we can," say, "Here's a bold idea, we can." Instead of, "This may be a dumb question, but," say, "Here's a question worth asking." Notice how much stronger and more intriguing the second versions sound. They're not arrogant, they're confident. They frame your contribution as valuable before anyone else has a chance to judge it. There's also a psychological benefit for you as a speaker. When you stop calling your ideas stupid, you start believing they're worthy. Your tone changes. Your body language shifts. Audiences pick up on that instantly. A practical exercise: review your speech or presentation script. Highlight any self-deprecating phrases before your ideas. Maybe, "I'm not sure, this might be silly." Replace them with neutral or positive framing. Practice saying them aloud. Notice how your energy changes. You can still be humble without undermining yourself. Humility is saying, "This is my perspective," or "Here's what I've discovered." It's not saying, "This is probably dumb." Humility invites dialogue, self-sabotage invites dismissal. I remember a panel discussion where one speaker began his answer with, "This might be a dumb answer," but the audience chuckled. By the end of his answer, which was actually insightful, no one was taking notes. Meanwhile, another panelist simply stated her view with confidence. She got quoted in the press coverage of the event. Same setting, similar ideas, different framing. Words shape perception. In public speaking, perception shapes impact. Don't give people a reason to undervalue you. Let your ideas speak for themselves, unchained from qualifiers that weaken them. If you're genuinely unsure how an idea will land, frame it as curiosity rather than insecurity. Say, "Here's something I'm exploring," or "Here's a provocative thought. What do you think?" This invites discussion without belittling yourself. Your audience doesn't need you to insult your own thinking. They need you to lead them to new insights with confidence. Drop the stupid disclaimers, and you'll be amazed how much more seriously people take you, and how much more seriously you start taking yourself. Chapter 6. To be honest. It seems harmless, even virtuous. You want to signal sincerity, so you add, "to be honest," or "honestly," or "if I'm being totally honest," before a point. You think you're building trust. But in a public speaking context, these phrases can do the opposite. Why? Because they imply that everything you've said before wasn't fully honest. When you suddenly announce honesty, you plant doubt. Audiences unconsciously wonder, "Were you not honest a moment ago?" This tiny ripple of doubt weakens your credibility. I once watched a CEO give a keynote at a tech conference. His speech was smooth until the third section, when he said, "To be honest, our competitors are ahead of us here." He meant to sound candid. Instead, it landed as an admission that he'd been spinning before. You could see the audience lean back. The Q&A afterwards was brutal. It's not that you can't be candid. Audiences love candor. But candor doesn't need a disclaimer. The most persuasive speakers simply state the truth. They don't preface it with "honestly" because honesty is assumed. When you're on stage, every word should already be authentic. Another version of this problem is "I'll be frank" or "let me be real with you." These two can feel like a shift in gear, as if you've been holding something back. It's especially damaging if used repeatedly. The more you say "honestly," the less people believe you. Here's a better approach. Drop the preface. Just tell the truth. Instead of, "To be honest, this is my favorite part of the project." Say, "This is my favorite part of the project." Instead of, "Honestly, I'm worried about this trend." Say, "I'm worried about this trend." See how the sentences get cleaner, stronger, and more credible. You're not telling people you're honest, you're showing them by speaking plainly. There's a deeper psychological effect here too. When you remove the crutch of "honestly," you train yourself to speak with natural authority. Your tone becomes more grounded. Your body language relaxes. People perceive you as confident and transparent. You can still signal sincerity without undermining yourself. For example, "I want to share something personal. Here's an insight that surprised me." This may be difficult to say, but it's important. These phrases set up honesty without implying you were dishonest before. They frame the moment as significant rather than suspicious. Another small trap, using "truth be told" or "if I'm being honest" as filler between ideas. It might feel conversational, but it weakens your authority. In a speech or presentation, every word matters. If you need a pause, pause. Silence is stronger than a weak filler. I remember a young entrepreneur pitching investors. She began 3 consecutive points with "honestly." By the end, one investor whispered to me, "Why does she keep saying that? Is she hiding something?" She wasn't, but the habit planted doubt where none existed. Great speakers understand that trust isn't built with disclaimers. It's built with clarity, consistency, and confidence. If you want people to believe you, speak as if your credibility is already solid, because it is. In public speaking, every phrase either adds or subtracts from your perceived authority. To be honest, sounds like it adds sincerity, but in reality it subtracts trust. Cut it, and your message immediately sounds cleaner, stronger, and more believable. Practice exercise. Record yourself delivering a portion of your speech. Listen for honestly, to be honest, or frankly. Replace them with direct statements. Watch how your delivery feels more authentic without the extra words. Audiences don't want you to promise honesty. They want you to embody it. Speak as though everything you say matters and is true, because it does. Chapter 7. I'm not prepared. Of all the self-defeating phrases, this one is perhaps the most destructive. Some speakers say it jokingly, to seem relatable. I'm not really prepared today. Others blurt it out nervously when they lose their place. Either way, it tells the audience they're about to waste their time. When you stand up to speak, you are, for a few minutes, the leader of the room. People give you their attention on the assumption that you've brought them something worth listening to. The moment you say, I'm not prepared or I didn't have time to prepare, you've broken that agreement. You're essentially telling them, I don't value your time as much as mine. Even if you think it softens expectations or buys forgiveness, it rarely works. Instead of lowering the bar, it lowers respect. Audiences don't think, oh, poor thing, they're busy. They think, why am I here? I once sat through a university lecture where the professor opened with, I didn't have time to prepare today. The students slumped instantly. Laptops opened, phones came out. No one was angry, they just stopped caring. Without preparation, the lecture became background noise. There's also a psychological effect on you, the speaker. When you declare you're unprepared, you sabotage your own confidence. Your body language tightens. Your delivery weakens. The audience feels your self-doubt and mirrors it. What should you do instead? First, actually prepare. But if you truly haven't, don't announce it. Deliver what you can with composure. Focus on what you do know, not what you lack. The audience will judge you on what they see and hear, not on your behind-the-scenes chaos. If you've been called to speak unexpectedly, you can still frame it positively. Instead of I'm not prepared, say, this is an off-the-cuff reflection. Let me share some spontaneous thoughts. I'm excited to speak to you about this right now. These phrases keep the audience's trust while being honest about the situation. You're not deceiving, you're framing. People love authenticity, but they don't like feeling shortchanged. Another dangerous cousin of this phrase is I didn't rehearse this. It might sound humble, but it also signals carelessness. Professionalism is partly about perception. Even if you thrive on improvisation, let your audience believe you've prepared to deliver value to them, because, in a sense, you always have, your experience, your insight, your story. There's a famous saying among performers, never let them see you sweat. The public speaking version might be, never let them think you don't care. Announcing a lack of preparation tells them you don't care. And once they believe that, they stop listening. Preparation doesn't just help you deliver your message. It's part of the message itself. Being ready says, you matter. Being unready says, you don't. In public speaking, people feel that on a gut level. Practice exercise. Record the opening of your speech. Listen for any hint of apology about your preparation. Rewrite it so it begins from a place of confidence, even if you're improvising. This small change can transform how you and your audience feel. The next time you're tempted to say, I'm not prepared, stop. Take a breath. Smile. Begin speaking as if you've been waiting for this moment all day. The audience will meet you at the level you set. Chapter 8. I'm nervous. This is one of the most common confessions people make at the microphone. It's honest. It feels human. It even gets a few sympathetic smiles from the audience. But in public speaking, it works like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The moment you declare you're nervous, you give your anxiety power and transfer it to the audience. When you say "I'm nervous," you're asking listeners to manage your emotions. They now have to reassure you instead of focusing on your message. In their minds, you go from presenter to amateur, from guide to guest. Even if you recover later, the first impression is lost. I once coached a young scientist about to present her research at a global conference. She opened with, "I'm really nervous about speaking in front of so many experts." The room visibly shifted. People leaned back, eyebrows rose. Instead of being curious about her data, they wondered if she could handle the stage. She was brilliant, but she had put herself on the defensive before she'd even begun. Of course, everyone gets nervous. Even seasoned speakers feel the adrenaline. But great speakers channel it rather than announce it. They let their preparation and delivery mask the tremor until the energy becomes focus. The audience feels confidence and excitement instead of worry. There are far better ways to be authentic without undermining yourself. For example, instead of, "I'm nervous about speaking here today," say, "I'm excited to share this with you today." Instead of, "I've never done this before," say, "I'm grateful for the chance to speak with you." These subtle shifts acknowledge the moment without surrendering authority. You still sound human, but also competent. Another trick: use your first breaths on stage to steady yourself rather than fill silence with disclaimers. Walk up, smile, make eye contact, and take a measured pause before speaking. That single pause signals composure far louder than any words. Audiences don't mind if you're nervous, they mind being told about it. They came to hear your message, not to manage your anxiety. If you feel shaky, ground yourself silently, plant your feet, breathe through your belly, and speak slowly at first. Most people will read your steadiness as confidence. It's also worth noting that telling people you're nervous can become a habit. Many speakers use it as an icebreaker. But icebreakers should engage the audience, not make them responsible for your state of mind. Use a quick story, a surprising fact, or a compelling question instead. Here's a mental reframe: nervousness and excitement are chemically almost identical, both involve adrenaline. The difference is the label. When you tell yourself, "I'm excited," you stand taller and sound brighter. When you tell yourself, "I'm nervous," you shrink. Choose the first label, and your audience will too. Practice exercise. Before your next talk, write a single positive sentence you'll think to yourself as you step up. "I'm excited." "I'm ready." "I'm grateful." Repeat it silently instead of confessing your nerves. Record yourself to see how different you look and sound. In public speaking, vulnerability can be powerful, but only when it's deliberate and in service of your message. "I'm nervous" is rarely deliberate, it's a reflex. Break the reflex, and you'll instantly appear more confident, even if you feel the butterflies. Chapter 9. I don't know if this will work, but... This phrase often creeps into speeches when a speaker is proposing an idea, suggesting a solution, or sharing a plan. It feels polite, cautious, even humble. Yet it's another silent killer of credibility. The moment you say, "I don't know if this will work," you plant doubt before the audience even evaluates your idea. You're asking them to prejudge your words, and usually, their judgment will lean negative. Let's put it into context. Imagine a manager pitching a new project to their team. She begins with, "I don't know if this will work, but maybe we could try." Instantly, the room's energy drops. Team members start calculating potential failures instead of envisioning possibilities. The idea itself might be innovative, brilliant even, but her phrasing ensures it's met with hesitation. The underlying problem is that you're surrendering authority. Every phrase in public speaking sends signals about your confidence, your knowledge, and your leadership. I don't know if this will work communicates uncertainty. People subconsciously translate that to, I'm not sure. Maybe you shouldn't trust me on this. There's a more effective way to present uncertainty. Frame it as exploration, not doubt. Use language that invites curiosity rather than caution. For example, instead of, I don't know if this will work, but we could try. Say, here's a new approach we can explore. Let's test this idea and see the results. I've identified an opportunity worth trying. These alternatives achieve the same intention. You're not guaranteeing perfection, but they keep you in control of the narrative. You sound thoughtful, proactive, and credible rather than hesitant. It's also worth noting the psychological effect on you, the speaker. Saying, I don't know if this will work primes your own mind for failure. You're already predicting a negative outcome, which subtly alters your delivery, your tone, and your body language. Confidence is contagious, doubt is too. If you lead with doubt, the audience will feel it. Even seasoned speakers occasionally fall into this trap. I once observed a startup founder at a major pitch event. He had developed a clever marketing strategy but prefaced every recommendation with, I'm not sure if this will work. Investors leaned back, skeptical, and the founder struggled to regain momentum. After coaching, he learned to introduce ideas assertively, then qualify them with logic. This strategy targets our key audience and could increase engagement by 30%. Let's test it and refine as we go. That small shift transformed investor perception entirely. Another variation is this might be a long shot, but, or I'm not certain this is the best solution. Both are essentially disclaimers. They reduce perceived risk on your part but inadvertently transfer that risk to the audience. They create hesitation, which can kill momentum and engagement. A better approach is to claim the idea first, then contextualize. Here's an innovative solution. While it's new, the potential benefits are clear. I have a strategy I want to propose, and here's why it could work. By asserting first and qualifying second, you stay in control. The audience is invited to consider your logic rather than prejudging your competence. Practice exercise. Review your last presentation or talk. Highlight phrases like I don't know if this will work or this might fail. Rewrite them using confident, exploratory language. Deliver the revised speech aloud. Notice how it changes the energy in your voice and posture. Ultimately, public speaking isn't just about sharing ideas, it's about inspiring belief. Words that preemptively express doubt undermine both. If you want your ideas to land, present them with clarity and authority. Invite exploration, curiosity, and engagement, but never let your audience sense that you doubt yourself first. Chapter 10. I'm sorry, but few phrases are as deceptively dangerous as this one. It's meant to soften the message, to acknowledge potential discomfort, or to appear polite. Yet every time you start a sentence with I'm sorry, but you're undermining your authority, weakening your delivery, and signaling to your audience that your ideas are negotiable or questionable. Consider how this plays out in real life. A speaker might say, I'm sorry, but we need to change the way we handle client complaints. The I'm sorry implies hesitation. The audience unconsciously hears, maybe this isn't the right thing to say. Even if the advice is sound, the apology dilutes it. You've already lost part of your impact. This phrase often sneaks into presentations out of habit. People are conditioned to be overly polite, to avoid confrontation, or to preempt resistance. But in public speaking, the audience expects leadership, clarity, and confidence. They didn't come to hear your self-doubt, they came to hear your insight. Another common variation is, I hate to say this, but, or I'm afraid that. Both are essentially apologies. They signal risk and insecurity, often unnecessarily. The audience may sympathize momentarily, but their attention shifts from your content to your emotional state. You're managing their feelings instead of delivering your message. A far more effective approach is to remove the apology and deliver the message directly. Instead of, "I'm sorry, but we're going to have to revise the plan," say, "We need to revise the plan to achieve the results we want." Instead of, "I hate to say this, but the project is behind schedule," say, "The project is behind schedule. Here's how we'll get back on track." Notice the difference. The second versions are clear, authoritative, and solution-focused. You're not apologizing for reality, you're addressing it. There's also a psychological aspect here. Every time you preface a statement with "I'm sorry, but," you reinforce a habit of self-doubt. Over time, this erodes your natural confidence and teaches audiences to expect hesitation from you. Your words become less persuasive because your mind is already anticipating resistance. One practical tip: if you catch yourself wanting to say "I'm sorry, but," pause. Ask yourself, is this statement inherently offensive, incorrect, or rude? If not, drop the apology. If it is, reframe it as a fact rather than a personal shortcoming. Speak the truth without qualifying it unnecessarily. I remember coaching a nonprofit director who frequently used "I'm sorry, but" in her annual board presentation. Her opening statements sounded weak, even though her ideas were excellent. After removing those apologies and practicing direct delivery, her talks became dynamic and compelling. Board members engaged more, asked better questions, and took action faster. The content hadn't changed, only the framing of her words had. Finally, understand that confidence isn't arrogance. It's clarity. When you state facts, propose changes, or deliver feedback, your authority is in how you present your message, not in how often you apologize. The goal is to lead, not to beg for approval. Practice exercise. Write down 10 common sentences from your talks that begin with "I'm sorry, but," or similar qualifiers. Rewrite each one as a direct, clear statement. Deliver them aloud. Notice how much stronger and more persuasive your delivery becomes. Remember, words like "I'm sorry, but" might feel polite in everyday conversation, but in public speaking, they're fatal. They chip away at your authority before your audience even processes your message. Cut them, speak directly, and command the stage with confidence. Conclusion. Throughout this book, we've examined the phrases that quietly sabotage your authority, dilute your message, and erode audience trust. From "Can you hear me?" to "I'm sorry, but," these words may seem small, even harmless, but in public speaking, the impact of language is magnified. Every sentence you speak sends signals about your confidence, competence, and clarity. The wrong words can undermine all three before your ideas have a chance to land. The key lesson is simple: awareness is everything. Recognize the words and phrases that lower your authority. Catch them before they escape your lips. Replace hesitation with confidence, doubt with clarity, and apology with assertiveness. Public speaking is not just about sharing information, it's about leading your audience. And leadership begins with the language you choose. Another essential insight is preparation and intention. Powerful words are rarely accidental. Great speakers think carefully about how each sentence will be received, how it frames the message, and how it positions them in the room. They rehearse, refine, and deliver with purpose. When you remove the fatal words, you create space for presence, influence, and impact. Finally, remember that mastery of public speaking is not about perfection. It's about consistent improvement. You will slip up. You might say honestly or "I'm nervous" without thinking. That's human. What matters is that you notice, adjust, and learn. Over time, the patterns of weak language will fade, replaced by clear, confident, and compelling speech. Every word you speak carries weight. Choose them wisely. Speak with authority. Deliver your ideas with clarity. Trust in your preparation, trust in your message, and most importantly, trust in yourself. When you do, your audience won't just hear your words, they'll feel them, remember them, and act on them. Public speaking is powerful. The right words can inspire, persuade, and move people. The wrong ones can quietly destroy credibility. Now that you know the fatal words to avoid, the rest is up to you. Step onto your stage with awareness, intention, and confidence, and watch the difference it makes.